Hello, everyone. Namaste. I'm music composer Ricky Kej, Grammy Award winner and United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. And you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi, everyone, and on this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, a conversation with musician, composer, and environmental advocate Ricky Kej. Stay tuned. So it really should be every day, but for at least conventional purposes, we just celebrated Earth Day this past weekend, and it's a healthy reminder to all of us to think responsibly about our daily impact on the environment and on our collective future. And speaking of impact in the future, thank you so much for listening to this and sharing it with your friends and family, for putting in a kind review or rating, and for following us on social media at Dr. Abhay Dandekar. So I think of music as one of the ultimate vehicles for human connection. But it really wasn't until I began listening to Indian musician and composer Ricky Kej and learning more about him that I realized the power of music as a celebration of humanity, goodwill, peace, action, and possibility. Ricky's professional career started by making award-winning commercial music in advertising, learning and gathering influence from virtually every genre of musical art. He soon began composing for film and television, and in 2015, his album Winds of Samsara won a Grammy for Best New Age Album. Now, for someone who was born in North Carolina and finished training as a dental surgeon, the path has been winding, but the focus of his art is unmistakably an extension of his personality and beliefs, as he considers each piece of music to be a personal reflection. Ricky's music and success have been tightly woven with environmental advocacy. He serves as a UN Global Goodwill Ambassador and stewards an incredible awareness for conservation and advancing environmental consciousness, seeing humanity as one family inhabiting our planet. His service is through his living example and continues, of course, through his music, fusing many cultural influences from around the world to soothe, uplift, enlighten, and inspire millions of listeners. With his album Divine Tides, in collaboration with drummer Stuart Copeland, Ricky's now won 2 more Grammy Awards for Best New Age Album in 2022 and Best Immersive Audio Album in 2023. It was terrific for him to join me for a conversation, and since he's an active performer touring for audiences worldwide, this is what we started to chat about. Is it possible for a Ricky Kej performance these days, or even aspiring to be? Is it possible at all for performers who have thousands of listeners, millions of listeners, a worldwide audience, to in fact have a carbon neutral live performance?
So the thing about being carbon neutral, especially when it comes to a live performance, is that it's just not possible to have an eco-friendly concert or a concert that is truly carbon neutral.
Yeah.
Simply because nothing can be carbon neutral nowadays.
Mm.
Whenever anybody says that an event or a concert is carbon neutral, there is a little bit of greenwashing involved in that.
Sure.
Simply because it involves a lot of offsetting of carbon footprint through tree plantations or investment in renewable energy. And we do that for every single concert of mine or every single travel of mine. But at the same time, it's about just keeping your conscience clear about, in whatever way you can. Because, concerts have got a huge energy usage. There's flight travel involved. There is a huge amount of lighting. Sometimes there is use of generators and things like that. So it's impossible to be carbon neutral in the way that we've built our systems around ourselves. It becomes very difficult for anything nowadays, like, even being born, to be carbon neutral.
Yeah.
So I guess...
even this podcast to some degree has a footprint in that way.
Not
too.
To some degree, to a large degree, because at the end of the day, you've got data centers, you've got internet usage, electricity usage. All of these things basically are huge on carbon footprint if you have to calculate it. In fact, if you have to go in depth into it, the clothes that we are wearing right now, the cotton t-shirt the cotton shirt that I'm wearing right now has got a water footprint of at least about 5,000 or 6,000 liters of water.
Yeah.
So that's the way it is, that the way that we've built our systems around us, it's pretty much impossible not to have an impact on the environment. But one can try and offset our carbon footprint in the most responsible way possible.
Mm.
But nevertheless, even offsetting also is a form of greenwashing. So
Yeah.
the best we can do is that try to ensure that whatever we do is not just responsible to the environment in the way of offsetting our carbon footprint and reducing our carbon footprint in the maximum amount possible, but also has a larger impact in terms of messaging.
Yeah.
So that in future, the future of this particular podcast could be that that more and more people adopt a more environmental friendly lifestyle.
Yeah, boy, I wish I could just grab a megaphone and yell loudly, which would probably have much less of a carbon footprint than the electronic things, and I'd have to perhaps wear less clothes, but definitely, being conscious of it, and I
Not
think
wear
awareness.
less clothes, just rewear your clothes. Not wear
Rewear
less
my clothes, correct.
Yeah.
First off, of course, congratulations, hearty congratulations on Grammy #3. I mean, an amazing accomplishment for sure. I imagine that the accolades and achievements are wonderful and definitely affirming. It certainly must offer more confidence and scope for the platform and the message and the motivations behind how you so powerfully talk about climate consciousness and even environmentalism. Do the awards at all alter or even change, or not change for that matter, the personality of the music or even the motivation at all?
At least in my case, it does not,
Yeah.
because there are always two ways to look at awards. One way to look at awards is, through a lot of vanity, where one can feel that, that they're the best and they're better than other people or better than their fellow nominees and things like that. That's not how I choose to look at awards. So for me, my music always has a very strong message, either a message of the environment or a message of social impact, or a message of kindness. And I believe that every single award that I win is a platform for me to do bigger and better things and to collaborate with more and more people, spread the message further and wider. Because a lot of people say that I'm not at all into awards or I do not like awards, but I do like awards because I believe that awards are important to give you that platform, as I just mentioned, to try to spread your message and your music further and wider. And that's so for me, every time I win an award, it's all about that how do I use this platform that I've been given? How do I use this new audience that I've been given to spread this message that I have further and wider?
Perhaps the fuel that's required, in fact, to make that message scale. You're at least a terrific collaborator, but you're a collaborator on this Grammy-winning, set of accomplishments. Of course, Stuart Copeland. I read that he said that making the record with you had been a unique adventure in both music and in divine awareness. And I'm curious about one thing. What did you particularly learn about your own music and even your own awareness in the divine in that same kind of journey?
So divine is a very vague word, and that's the reason why I like that word a lot, because it could have a little bit of a spiritual connotation. But for me as a person, myself, I'm not at all spiritual, nor do I believe in God.
Yeah.
So I'm a complete 100% atheist, and I do not believe in anything supernatural or anything above what we can understand. What we can understand, and what we do not understand, I just leave that to being something that I just do not understand. That's about it. But I do understand the whole spiritual element because a lot of people tell me that they find my music to be very spiritual, or they find me to be a spiritual person. But how I define spirituality is very simple, that sometimes when you are faced with something that is extremely beautiful or something that you just cannot define, it could be beautiful music. That happens to me all the time, where I listen to something which is extremely beautiful and I'm very overwhelmed by the beauty of the music, that sometimes I get tears in my eyes, or sometimes I'm, as they say, transported to a different plane, and or sometimes I see a beautiful sunset or a beautiful scenery or a beautiful mountain, and and my primitive brain just cannot is so overwhelmed by the beauty of that scenery or the beauty of that art, that one cannot just attribute it to something that is explainable. It's something that is completely inexplainable, and that is many a times attributed, that overwhelming experience, that overwhelming emotion that we do not understand, is sometimes attributed to being spiritual. So I believe that we as musicians are extremely successful if we have that effect on somebody. So whenever somebody tells me that they feel that my music is very spiritual, I feel that my music is successful because I've basically overwhelmed that person. So yeah, so that's what spirituality is to me. And yes, I have a spiritual moment very, very often when I listen to beautiful music or I see something beautiful.
In this particular instance, is that, as Stuart Copeland mentioned those things, and certainly you share what that spirituality means to you, was that something you had to learn, or is that something that you always felt very aware of, whether playing music or whether creating music or not?
No, it's not something that you have to be aware of. At the end of the day, our responsibility is to just make music that I communicate through my music. I think through my music. So music is just an extension of what I do.
Sure.
Anytime I feel strongly about something, I create music on that. If I do not feel strongly about something, I just don't create music.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm waiting to be paid to make music, or or a film director is asking me to make music on a certain topic. So the music is just an extension of me, and that's how I create my music. And if it has an effect on somebody, then I just find myself to be successful in that particular piece of music. Uh, there are obviously two ways to make music. One is creating music that is a one size fits all approach, which is basically what pop music is all about and what mainstream music is all about. So there, you are reaching to a very, very wide audience of different demographics, put together, and
Sure.
trying to create entertaining music that will appeal to a whole lot of people, which is
Yeah.
basically a pop music. And the second style of music is creating music which is more niche, music that you like yourself, and music that excites us as musicians, and create that kind of music. But in over there, the struggle becomes not about trying to get a mass audience to listen to it, but to find that audience that actually agrees with you. And that's what niche music is all about. Like, for example, a jazz musician, or a global musician, or a world musician, or you know uh, or even a folk musician. For them, it's not about trying to get millions and millions of people to listen to the music, but it's about finding that niche audience that actually loves your music and remains loyal to your music till the day you die.
It reminds me of one thing, and this may or may not resonate, and we might come back to this in a few minutes, but we as pediatricians or even physicians, when we work in the outpatient, we find that really the greatest outpatient doctors that I've ever met are ones who are very, very cognizant of what it's like to work in the hospital. And those doctors who work in the hospital, who I think are brilliant, are ones who know very much what it's like to work in the clinic and in the outpatient setting. I'm curious for you, does what you just shared about kind of niche music and the focus of, say, niche music, or whether it be world music, or even the instrument of spirituality that you mentioned before, is it some ways really important to be conscious of the difference between what you just mentioned, between niche music and, say, popular music, or music that has a slightly different appeal?
I don't think it's about being conscious about the difference. It's just about not being delusional. That if you're creating music that you yourself appreciate, and you know that it's very dissimilar from what is pop music and what is normally played on radio for mass audiences or on television for mass audiences, then one cannot be delusional that the whole world will be listening to my music.
Sure.
One has to be realistic that there is definitely an audience for your music, because there will be the people who agree with you and like the kind of music that you like. But at the same time, it's not going to be like a billion people. It's going to be it's going to be a very loyal audience, but a small niche audience, and that audience will follow you forever, and will wait for you to create a new piece of music, or will wait for you to create a new album. Whereas when it comes to a more mainstream audience, you are the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year. Where people are going to listen to your music for a certain period of time, and once you time out, or once you zone out, or once your time period is over and the new flavor comes out, or the new genre of music which sort of appeals to everybody comes out, then basically your history, and you become a thing of the past. So that's why niche music and creating music from the heart has got its advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
But the biggest advantage that I cannot let go of is basically creating music that you yourself love listening to, rather than creating music which is based on a brief.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, let's come back to our conversation with Ricky Kej. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, this is Madhuri Dixit, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's now rejoin our conversation with musician, composer, and environmental advocate Ricky Kej. It seems like that kind of sensibility allows for a true sort of joy in obviously creating that music, and then on top of that, hopefully makes that music timeless. I'm also curious about one thing. It's nearly impossible to separate themes of tradition and culture from your work, and of course how people feel about that, as you mentioned. Yet each piece offers a reimagination and a reinvention, especially when working with some of your collaborators, particularly who are global and may not necessarily come from the same tradition. Are you naturally someone who has always sort of blended reverence for tradition with also that reinvention and reimagination, perhaps? And is this something that's come naturally for you for a long time?
So I do have a tremendous amount of reverence when it comes to traditions and when it comes to ancient cultures. But at the same time, it's not because of my reverence that ancient or even contemporary cultures of music finds its way into my music. It's just because I love it.
Yeah.
And it's just because, again, that's a natural extension of me.
Sure.
As a person, that it just shows up in my music. And that's the reason why I collaborate with tribal populations all over the world.
Yeah.
I collaborate with traditions like Indian classical music, the North Indian forms or the South Indian forms. And I myself am more of a contemporary musician. But at the same time, for me, that fusion with traditional cultures, especially when it comes to Indian cultures, and also when it comes to African cultures, other Southeast Asian cultures, even European cultures, it just feels good to collaborate, because these are things, these are cultures, and these are musical forms that I absolutely adore.
Yeah.
And it just finds its way into my music.
Are there particular elements of that khichdi, if you will, that are exciting for you, whether that be thinking about Peter Gabriel or Pharrell or Fateh Ali Khan or any of these kind of indigenous people's music that can resonate quite loudly and perhaps even blend, or even the unknowns that are out there?
I guess it's just whatever I'm exposed to at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
That's what excites me at that particular time period.
Right. Has making this kind of music, particularly, as you mentioned, like being reverent for the tradition, but not necessarily having it completely steer or guide you, has that made you more self-aware of your own personality, moods, and temperatures? Has it made you more patient, or maybe even more forgiving, as you've particularly developed and grown as a musician?
I guess it's very difficult for me to answer that question, but I guess collaboration in itself, it helps you respect other people's opinions in a huge way, because many times when I'm collaborating with musicians, one has to completely agree that this is a 50-50% collaboration, and everybody's opinions matters. My opinions matter, and my collaborator's opinion matters. And there are many times where I feel very strongly about something that that I really wanted in a particular way, but there has to be a sense of compromise, because that the person collaborating with you also feels strongly, but maybe in an opposing way.
Yeah.
So there has to be a sense of compromise over there, because you have to respect their opinions.
Sure.
And you have to find a middle ground somewhere. And there are always two outcomes of this. One outcome is that maybe after about a year of release of that particular piece of music, and and you're living with that piece of music as a released piece of music, where the audiences have already been exposed to that piece of music multiple times, you still believe that you were right. And that's also completely fine.
Yeah.
Because that's also completely fine because that's a learning process of of being a musician and an artist. The second outcome could be that after living with that piece of music for a very long time, you realize that you were absolutely wrong, and and you're looking at things from a completely different perspective, but that perspective was wrong because you were too close to that piece of art.
Yeah.
And and you could not look at things objectively. But now that you've been living with that piece of music for a while, you can look at things objectively, and you can look at things from a distance, and you realize that that your opinion in the first place was completely wrong, and this actually going your collaborator's way was actually closer to your vision than having gone your own way, because you arrived at that emotion that you wanted to arrive at more effectively through the route that your collaborator took, but you just did not know about it at the time.
Right. And so you mentioned that, look, you wait that extra time, you wait for that year, that period, that time period. Is that something that initially in your career, did you ever struggle with that? Was that something that you had to grow into a little bit?
So when I started off my career, I started off doing advertising music.
Yeah.
So I did, of course, that was in a past life. I did more than 3,500 commercials for pretty much every brand imaginable and their competitor. And there were days when I would do between 2 to 3 commercials, wake up in the morning at about 7 a.m., do a commercial for a client in India, finish that off by about 2 o'clock, then work for a client in Europe, then wrap that up by about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the night, then work for a client in the West Coast of America.
Yeah.
So when I believe that working on advertising music was the best educational process when it came to music, not only to teach me different forms of different genres of music, because every day is a different challenge, and every day it's a different challenge in working on a completely different genre of music and a different creative professional, but also to look at your own music very objectively.
Sure.
Because if you are getting paid a huge amount of money to create a piece of music and in a very quick time period, then your client is not going to mince words when they do not like the piece of music. And when they do not like a piece of music, they're not actually critiquing the music itself, but they're critiquing your interpretation of their brief.
Yes.
So that's the way it is. Like, for example, if you make a piece of music for Heineken, and it's a brilliant piece of music that you made for Heineken, that same brilliant piece of music is not going to work for Mercedes-Benz.
Sure.
It's going to be a completely different piece of music that will work for them. And a piece of music that you make for Mercedes-Benz is not going to work for a client like Toyota.
Yeah.
So basically, it's all about creating pieces of music that works for the personality of a brand. And if the brand manager feels that that piece of music is not correct for their brand, they're going to be very vocal about it.
Yeah.
They're not attacking the quality of music, but they're attacking the relevance of the music.
Sure.
So that way you end up developing a very thick skin when it comes to criticism. And you also learn not to fall in love with every piece of music that you yourself create. And you constantly evolve as a musician. You meet all these other musicians because you're working on these various genres of music. You start looking at genres of music as not being good or bad, but you start looking at, you do not diss genres of music saying that I don't like heavy metal music or I don't like hip hop music.
Yeah.
You start looking at all genres of music as being music itself.
Right.
And, and you start looking at just 2 genres of music, like, good quality music and bad quality music.
Yeah.
So that's what happened with me, because I did commercials for about 13 or 14 years.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is what made me develop a thick skin towards criticism and understand feedback. Because sometimes, like, let's say I make a piece of music that is a meditative piece of music.
Yeah.
And I get feedback from somebody saying that, oh, that's a very boring music. And I realize that that person is a fan of heavy metal music. So that while you completely respect that person's opinion, that person's opinion is not relevant to the music that you're creating. So you learn how to sift through criticism, respect people's opinions, and understand what is the opinion that actually matters to the kind of music that you're creating, and which ones are the opinions that one has to take very, very seriously.
I would say that that's sound advice for anybody in any field, for sure, and definitely one that spells success, sounds like, for you, for sure. I want to turn to something slightly different, and that is, I'm curious, from those same experiences, right? Developing this kind of repetitive yet important accelerator for maturing and developing and understanding what feedback is meant to be. When you think about that same arc of development, when do you first remember perhaps being aware or cognizant that your music could in fact synchronize with activism and environmental consciousness? Do you remember? Was that sort of an aha moment for you at all?
No, so the thing is that I would definitely not call myself an activist. I'm more of an advocate. Activism is something that that people just label me as, but that is something that I'm not, because there are always two approaches to to solve problems, especially environmental problems. What I've coined very widely as that the Greta Thunberg approach, and the second is the Sir David Attenborough approach.
Sure.
So the Greta Thunberg approach is also very effective, but it's a route that I've not taken. That's more about doom and gloom and showing a post-apocalyptic scenario or shaming people into action.
Sure.
Which is effective in its own way, but that's not a route that I've taken. For me, it's more of the Sir David Attenborough approach of showcasing the beauty of this world, because at the end of the day, we only protect things that we love. We only love things that we understand.
Yeah.
And we only understand things that we are taught. And I believe that the Sir David Attenborough approach of making everyone fall in love with the natural world, and hopefully through that love we will find it within ourselves to protect, to conserve, and to sustain.
Yeah.
So I've taken that second route, which is about advocacy, and that's the reason why I work a lot with the United Nations. I'm the Global Goodwill Ambassador, simply because the United Nations always believes not in activism but in working with people and working with governments. Even if officials, let's say in the United Nations, do not agree with a particular government, they will never work against the government.
Yeah.
They will always work with a government or with an entity. Like, for example, in Afghanistan, you've got the Taliban, which is in rule, in power over there. But even then, you still have a UNICEF field office. You've got a UNHCR field office. You've got all these field offices over there, simply because whoever is in charge, we will work with you because we want to work for the betterment of everybody. So we do not want to neglect your people just because we don't like you, So
it's a great way to constantly collaborate with people. And like you said,
it's all about the spirit of collaboration at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, you have to work with people, figure out what their motivations are. So when it comes to music itself, as I said, that music is an extension of me. So whatever I feel strongly about, that's what I'm going to be making music on. So it's not a conscious effort to create advocacy through my music. It's not a conscious effort to, or an aha moment that, that my music is about spreading this particular message or whatever. It's just about what I want to communicate. Instead of talking, I communicate through my music.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Grammy Award-winning musician Ricky Kej. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hello, I am Odyssey dance artist Bijoyini Satpathy, and you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's now rejoin our conversation with Ricky Kej. Let me ask you one thing. If in that same kind of elegant way that you described the Greta Thunberg versus the Sir David Attenborough approach, if you really think about the kind of love and the joy that's behind sharing the love for the natural world in that, how do you perhaps also, if there's a way to do this, or perhaps it's not meant to necessarily be the vehicle for this, but how do you prescriptively address urgency or mood or activity, perhaps, in that same spirit of loving the natural world, so that, particularly through your music, which isn't always anthem-based or lyrically based, can still produce not just great love, but perhaps even momentum to spread awareness and consciousness and better outcomes for that matter?
So the thing is that we as human beings, when we interact with different people or different species also, when we interact with different people, we automatically change our method of interaction. Like, for example, if you're talking to a child, I wouldn't be talking the way that I'm talking to you. There would be a certain cuteness that I would try to bring in my voice.
Sure.
My language would change, and this would be an automatic thing. It would be a conscious effort of me trying to communicate with a child. Automatically, my body language changes, my voice changes, the kind of words that I use changes, the way that I look at a child changes. It's the same thing. It's different for different people, and it's the same thing when I'm performing for musicians or when I'm creating music for musicians. It's not a conscious effort to write music in a different way,
Yeah.
but it's just that it automatically happens because we as human beings, we bridge a divide between us and the person we are communicating with in a different style, and that is a natural way of doing things. So I believe that when I communicate with people through my advocacy through music, it's different when I'm communicating with world leaders, like, for example, with my performances at the United Nations or to Fortune 500 companies, or or people who can bring about mass change within their own capacities. And it's completely different when I'm communicating with mass audiences at music festivals, like audiences about 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 people at music festivals, or it's completely different when I'm communicating with children.
Yeah.
So there are different ways of communicating the same message, but in different styles. So I believe that with all the problems that we face on our planet today, I believe that when it comes to a ground up approach, I believe that the biggest threat is the constant thought that we have that somebody else will make a difference.
Yeah.
Because we're always waiting for governments, for intergovernmental bodies, for corporations, for leaders to make a difference. When everybody talks about changing the world, people very rarely talk about changing themselves. And I believe that that is the biggest threat to us as a species.
Yeah.
That we very rarely talk about changing ourselves. And that's not because we're evil people. It's just because that's how the systems are built around us.
Yeah.
That we just, the way that we've been taught through our schools, the way that the education system has made us believe that that we are just not powerful enough to bring about change within our own capacities. And it's always governments that can bring about change. Yeah. Even the United Nations also is at fault at this, because when the United Nations talks about their sustainability goals, they talk about these huge overarching goals like zero poverty, zero hunger, climate action, protecting all life on land, protecting all life on water. So when a common person looks at that and says that and reads that, okay, we have to protect all life on land, how am I going to do that?
Right.
So that's what I try to do through my concerts, that try to empower everyone to believe that the small, tiny, incremental changes that they make within their own lives can actually make a difference. And that is all that matters. Nobody needs to change the world. Nobody needs to bring about change on a mass level. Nobody needs to change. Nobody needs to, be a world leader. But what you need to do is that just figure out these small, tiny, incremental changes that you can do within your own life, like, reducing your use of single-use plastics, or using public transportation whenever it's suitable for us.
Sure.
Reducing our consumption of meat. These are the small things that we can possibly do. Not subscribing to fast fashion.
Yeah.
That we can do within our own capacities. To actually make a difference, and that is all that matters.
Is this the motivation and the particular fuel and driver behind when trying to coalesce the music and the community around a movement like Lifestyle for the Environment that you're working on with the Prime Minister?
Yeah, so the Prime Minister's mission of Lifestyle for the Environment, Life, is actually a really, really good mission, because this is something that I've been talking about for years.
Yeah. And
it's very nice that this is going mainstream right now because of the Prime Minister's vision on life.
Sure.
Now, the thing is that I believe that, currently we have something called as a use and throw economy, where everything is about being disposable, like plastics itself. Plastics were invented as a miracle material in the early 1900s simply because it was not biodegradable and it would not wash away.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we as human beings have decided that a non-biodegradable material is disposable, which absolutely makes no sense.
Right.
Because if it's non-biodegradable, that means that it needs to be reusable, but we've just made it disposable.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, every single plastic toothbrush, every single plastic straw, every single plastic bag that we've ever thrown away in our entire life exists in some form or the other on this planet, maybe broken down into small pieces, but it exists somewhere.
Yeah.
And 100 million sea animals die every single year just from consuming plastics in their diet, And 1 million seabirds die every single year because their intestines are lined with plastic.
Yeah.
So that's how bad this thing is. And in fact, we human beings, we consume a credit card size piece of plastic, or rather, that's on an average, we consume one credit card size amount of plastic every single month, and that is just through our food system. So that's what we need to do. We need to understand that it is cause. I mean, that there is every action of ours has got consequence. Like a very quick example that I can give you is that in 2020, when the pandemic had just started, there was this very powerful image that had captured everybody's imagination all over the world. It was this dead female pregnant elephant, who died while standing in the middle of a lake in Kerala. And this was a very powerful image. It was showcased in pretty much every single newspaper, every single publication all over the world, whether it's LA Times or Los Angeles Times, or New York Times or BBC, CNN, everywhere in the world. And it is a very powerful image because, what happened was that the story behind it is that this pregnant female elephant, she walked out of the forest in search of food, and she got into this farmland, and she ate this pineapple fruit. And little did she know that the farmer had laden the fruit with explosives, and it exploded in her mouth fatally. So while she was wobbling around and she was dying, and she walked all the way to a lake, and she stood right in the middle of the lake, and she died over there. And it was a very powerful image, as I said. And of course, there were reactions from all over the world that the farmer needs to be punished, the farmer needs to be hung upside down, the farmer needs to be killed or beheaded, or put into jail for the rest of his life. And but what we do not realize is that we as city people, or living all over the world, we need to look inwards, that this is completely our fault, because if we do not have electricity for 3 or 4 minutes, we are so inconvenienced. If the new iPhone comes out and they do not make enough of the iPhone, we are so inconvenienced that why can't they make more of these phones? Where are all these minerals coming from, like silica, iron, nickel, cadmium, lithium? Where is all that coming from? Where is all the coal coming from for electricity? Digging up the forest. So our consumption patterns are destroying the food sources of this poor elephant. And this elephant has no other choice but to walk out of the forest. And then the elephant ends up going to a farmland, and the farmer has to make this ridiculous and punishable offense of actually protecting his or her livelihoods and his or her family, the lives of his or her family, and has to put explosives in the fruit. And because of this, the elephant dies. And and all of us are responsible for this. So our actions have got consequences in very profound ways that we ourselves do not experience.
This example is such a powerful one of the consumption chain, and one that certainly you speak so passionately about. I'm curious for you, every single time you have a conversation like this, every single time you make music and you collaborate with others, is that constantly a driver to really enact change on a personal level, not just for people having one-on-one conversations with you, but hopefully for all your audiences?
Not true, but the thing is that it's very important to draw that fine line between advocacy and just being pedantic. Because what happens is that when one is too preachy, again, you are driving away people rather than bringing people together.
Sure.
And so that's why what I try to do is that, of course, I live the life that is extremely important, and it's very important for me to, to practice certain things, and and sort of in my own small way and in my own capacity, in my own tiny capacity, to lead by example. That becomes really important. So a few things that I do within my own life is that I do not subscribe to fast fashion at all. The shirt that you see me wearing, you will see me wearing in many, many pictures on my Instagram.
Sure.
At any given point of time, I only have 11 sets of clothes, and that's all. I do not. Like for example, the last year when I won my Grammy in 2022, I wore a blue sherwani, and I ended up wearing that same sherwani for about 40 concerts after that. I retired that sherwani finally when it actually tore. This year I wore another cream sherwani, and already I've finished 11 concerts in that sherwani. So basically I do not mind in fact I double down on that it's important to have the same clothes repeatedly on your Instagram or on your social media, because the earth does not remember what you've worn, but the earth definitely remembers how you've treated it. That's extremely important, and fashion can be fashionable more than once. The second thing that I do is that I don't own a car. I use public transportation, because if I'm using public transportation when I'm traveling to different cities and countries, then may as well do that in my own city. And why have a car? I know there is this whole debate about electric mobility and whether fossil fuels are fine or whether hybrid cars are fine, or whether the manufacturing process of electric mobility is good for our carbon footprint and things like that.
Sure.
So I do believe that electric cars are the future because they're getting better and better, and the carbon footprint of the manufacturing process is getting lower and lower as we move forward and as we reach a critical mass. But at the same time, I think the best thing would be just not to have a car. That would be the most environmental friendly, and just use public transportation.
Sure.
And try to request our leaders to give us better and better public transportation.
Yeah.
The next thing is that I have a meat-free diet, and that is something that everybody has to figure out for themselves because there's a huge cultural significance with this. So that's why one just needs to understand what is the best route when it comes to this. And lastly is that what I spoke about right in the beginning, I get my carbon footprint audited every quarter. So at the end of every quarter, once my carbon footprint is audited, and this is like a complete 360-degree approach towards auditing my carbon footprint, I get I have a meeting with some really good professionals to figure out how I can reduce my carbon footprint for the next quarter. What is it that I can do to make changes which are practical enough for me? And based on that, I reduce my carbon footprint in the next quarter. And I also do what I mentioned. I offset my carbon footprint to tree plantations and investment in renewable energy companies. So these are the things that I follow. And I try to, encourage people, to figure out what is it that they can do within their own lives. And what is practical enough for everybody to do, because the systems are built against the environment right now. So it's very difficult to follow a lot of things.
I love the kind of holistic, like you said, holistic analysis, not just the holistic activity, but the holistic analysis that, you try and make sure that you're always analyzing this. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Ricky Kej.
Hello, my name is Lakpa Sherba. I'm Summit Mountain Everest 10 times. And you listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and let's now rejoin our conversation with musician, composer, and environmental advocate, Ricky Kej. I want to pivot very quickly to the music. For a second, you mentioned that you have that foundation in composition and scoring and marketing with jingles and understanding how that's actually helped develop and in some ways inform your current, creative process. Yet I'm imagining that it's a challenging wedge for niche music and for the music that you create to be in the backdrop or forefront, however way one actually thinks about it, in the Hindi movie music landscape, especially in the consumer appetite for a place like India and even the global, market out there. Does the appetite or the trend of the consumer ever drive the question of the semantics, if you will, of being a musician versus a craftsman? Do you have to constantly sort of examine how this works, or is it simply that just doesn't matter? Making music you love is always at the core.
So for me, if I have to speak personally, then for me it's just about creating art. Like if you look at an artist like from a completely different medium, like a Vincent van Gogh, for example.
Yeah.
Vincent van Gogh, if he's making a new piece of art, then I cannot even imagine him going to all the neighboring art galleries and figuring out that what is everybody else doing,
right? What's popular?
What's popular? What's in vogue right now? Okay, let me do something similar.
Yeah.
So he would just dig deep into his own soul and create a piece of art that defines him as a person, and defines his state of mind at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
And I believe that music also is an art form. And it's very important to stay true to who you are as a musician. At least that's what I feel personally.
Yeah.
That like coming back to the example of Vincent van Gogh, if I wanted to know what kind of a person he was, I'm probably not going to read a book about him. I'm probably going to just look at his art and judge what kind of a person he was by just looking at his art. But the thing is that if you look at the Bollywood music industry in India, everybody is only making love songs or what they call item songs, like the dance songs, or, the songs which end up itemizing or objectifying, women. They're sort of mildly misogynistic. And I believe that the composers and the lyrics writers who are actually making these songs are not like that in real life. They definitely respect women. They've got very good family lives, and they are heavily into gender equality, so I believe that, and they definitely do not objectify women in their own lives.
Is their product then a different art because
no? So that's what I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
So I believe that a lot of people are making music and making art that they themselves do not listen to. And I believe that, yes, these people are looking at music as being more of a job. But for me, that does not excite me, because then I would have probably been an engineer, or been been doing something that I anyway do not like, so rather than,
Right.
because if I'm in a field of art, which is my passion, then within that field of art, I want to do things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
Because many times people do become artists, and it's their dream to become artists, but within that art form, they're not creating art that they're proud of,
Yeah.
or they themselves listen to, or they themselves enjoy. And that is a little bit of a problem. And of course, now people know that these composers and these Bollywood composers are making these misogynistic songs, or these item songs, because they're paid to make it.
Yeah.
But soon that is going to become a part of their personality, because that is what is going to define them. I mean, that when you just run a search for, because now in the era of the internet, you run a search for the composer's name, quicker than their own bio and quicker than their own personal life, their song shows up. And, and the song ends up defining you as a person. And, and I believe that I would rather be lesser known for the music that defines me as a person, rather than being extremely well known for a song that absolutely does not define me as a person, or for a song that would be the opposite of what defines me.
I want to ask you something that kind of just strikes me as you talk about that. Do you think that, I mean, I'm a novice when it comes to the music that is ambient or new age, as perhaps its genre is called. But when I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just curious what you have to say about this. Do people misconceive that ambient or new age or world music? Do they misconceive it as being more passive or more mood oriented rather than an active or vigorous commercial discipline like some of these other genres of music? Is that
It's not a misconception. New age music and world music or global music, all these genres of music, they can be passive and they can be involving.
Yeah.
So there are some people who prefer it to be passive, like, for example, some great composers like Brian Eno, Kitaro.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of them, who create new age music and world music and sort of these global music genres as being very passive, because they believe that they want to just elevate the mood of a person,
Sure,
rather than it being participative. And for them, they feel that their music is unsuccessful if while playing playing back music, if a member of the audience actually gets involved and actually looks at the music system, or looks in the direction of the source of music, that would be a failure in their part.
Yeah.
So that's how they look at it, that it has to be completely uninvolving, it has to be background music, and it should just elevate the mood.
Yeah.
So there are many of them, like Steve Roach and many ambient artists who make this kind of music, Stephen Halpern, and all of them make extremely good music, and I love listening to their music. I'm huge fans of their music.
Yeah.
And then you have the others, like the Peter Gabriels, the Enyas, the Yannis,
Yeah.
where the music is a little more music is a little more participative,
Yeah.
in terms of beautiful vocals and lyrics, and and the music actually involves you. Sometimes it's even dancey, the music, it's in different styles, and I dabble in both styles because I like both styles of music. So it depends upon my mood at that particular point in time when I'm actually creating the music.
Yeah. When new listeners are hearing your work for the first time, or even your longtime fans are hearing your new music, or they're watching you perform, how do you hope they feel afterwards? And what do you hope they're saying?
So for me, it's all about entertainment. So for me, the most important thing is that I'm hoping, because again, I have to find my audience. So it's very important that, for me at my concerts, it's very important that the audience that shows up for my concerts, again, is not a one size fits all approach, but it's an audience that has been educated as to what my music is all about. That is very, very important. So it has to be an audience that knows what to expect at a concert of mine. So for me, the most important thing is that audience that shows up for my concert is thoroughly entertained.
Yeah.
That is first and foremost, because if they're not entertained, the message is meaningless.
Yeah.
So it is very important that first and foremost that they're extremely entertained and they absolutely love the music. They love the talent behind the music. They love the musicality of the music, all of that. And at the same time, as I mentioned, first and foremost, they're very entertained. Yeah. But when they go back home, or once the music is finished and once the sound is off, they have something very strong to think about.
Ricky, well, I'm sad that this conversation's ending, but I'm grateful for all that you're doing, all the awareness that you're galvanizing, both through your music and through your messages, and really sort of speaking and creating from the heart. Thank you so much for joining us. What a treat, and I hope we can visit with you again down the road.
Thank you so much. All my very best.
Thanks so much, and please check out rickykej.com. Bhumi, or Mother Earth, deserves our full, undivided attention every single day. So please be thoughtful about what you consume, what you produce, and what you conserve. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.